You text him first because it feels worse not to, because the silence eats at you in ways words never could, because waiting feels like drowning, because something in you learned long ago that love means proving you care more, even if he never texts back the same way. Even if every message feels like a breadcrumb you're too hungry to question, you pick up your phone not just to reach out but to reach back. Back to the part of you that still believes you can earn love. Fix it, change it, save it. But what if stopping is the first act of healing? In this video, we're not just talking about texting him first. We're talking about the wounds behind it, the silent grief of being the one who always tries harder, the ache of giving more than you receive, the fear of what happens if you just stop. This isn't a lecture. It's a conversation for your heart, for the part of you that's exhausted, doubting, or quietly breaking. You won't be told what to do, but you will be seen. So take a breath, just one, and let the words find you where you are. And if it already feels like I'm speaking your language, hit subscribe, or like this video. Not because you're told to, but because something here finally feels like it gets you. Now let's begin. You stop texting him first, and at first it feels like withdrawal, like silence has claws, like maybe you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. You stare at your phone longer than you'd ever admit. Check it, recheck it. Not because anything's changed, but because you need to believe it might. Because you hope deep down that the silence will shake something in him. That maybe, this time, he'll feel your absence like you felt his every time he left you waiting. But nothing comes. Not right away. And that's when the real ache begins. Because the silence you gave him, it echoes back into you. And now you're not just sitting in a quiet conversation. You're sitting with yourself. With every memory. Every unmet need. Every moment you said it's fine when it wasn't. Every time you laughed it off. Let it go. Said no worries even though your chest was tight with them. You wonder if you mattered, if any of it did. And that's the thing about stopping. It doesn't just stop the messages. It stops the illusion. Because when you no longer chase, you start to see who runs. There's no more pretending it's mutual when you're the only one reaching out. There's no more comfort in half-effort replies when you're not the one initiating. There's no more guessing, just the cold, quiet truth. He doesn't reach out. Not because he didn't see your worth, but because he never had to value it, because you made it so easy, so available, so unquestioning. That's not your fault. You learned it somewhere. Maybe from a parent who made you work for their attention. Maybe from love that came in conditions. Maybe from a world that taught you being wanted was the reward for being selfless. But now you're here, no longer playing the part, no longer pushing the story forward. And the silence, it's louder than you expected, not because you miss him, but because for the first time you're meeting yourself. And she's not sure who she is when she's not chasing love. This is where the shaking begins. Not in your hands, but in your beliefs. The ones that told you, if I stop, it all falls apart. The ones that said, if I'm not enough, I'll be left behind. But here's the paradox. When you stop texting him first, you don't lose love. You lose the illusion of it. You lose the dance where you always lead. The guessing game where you're always left waiting. The ache of hoping someone will meet you where you already are. And maybe that loss is the beginning, not of loneliness, but of truth. Because love, real love, doesn't need you to keep proving your worth. It shows up. Not when you chase it, but when you choose yourself. And maybe, just maybe, stopping is how you finally start. There's a moment, a quiet one, when you realize he was never really afraid to lose you. That's the thought that breaks something open inside. Not in anger, not in drama, but in that slow, soul-deep ache that comes when truth finally settles in. Because you gave him access to the most sacred parts of you, your time, your softness, your energy. And he received it like someone who believed the sun would rise every morning, whether he looked up or not. And still, you hoped. You hoped if you were kind enough, patient enough, open enough, something in him would shift. But you see it now. People don't change because you love them louder. They change when they decide they want to. And while you were texting paragraphs, he was offering fragments. While you were remembering every detail he shared, he was forgetting how it feels to be held in your presence. You didn't just text him first. You filled the space. You carried the conversation. You kept the thread alive so it wouldn't snap. But now it's quiet. And this quiet, it's different. It isn't the kind that waits in fear. It's the kind that listens. You start to notice things, like how your body feels when you're not checking your phone every 5 minutes, like how your breath deepens when you're not bracing for a lukewarm reply, like how free your mind becomes when it's not building stories around his silence. And maybe for the first time, you feel peace. Not because he reached out, but because you didn't, because the need to hear from him has loosened its grip, because you didn't abandon yourself this time, because you finally chose not to chase breadcrumbs in the hope they'd lead to a feast. He might notice, eventually, some do. They feel the shift when you stop showing up on command, when your presence is no longer a guarantee, when they feel the absence of a love they never bothered to match. He might text again. Hey, what's up? Been busy. But something's different now. You don't rush to respond. You don't spin stories in your mind to justify his delay. You read his words with a new clarity. You see them for what they are, a flicker, not a fire. And while once that flicker would have lit up your entire chest, now it barely touches the edges. Because you've seen what real connection feels like, and this isn't it. You don't hate him. That's not what this is. There's no venom in your veins, no bitterness on your tongue. There's just understanding. He was never meant to hold the space you were trying to fill. You wanted a mirror and got a wall. You wanted warmth and got a window into your own loneliness. And it wasn't fair, but it was familiar. That's what hurts the most, not that he didn't text back, but that somewhere along the way you thought that was normal. And now, you're rewriting what normal looks like, not just in your love life, but in your soul. You wake up one morning, and something has shifted, not all at once. Not like a movie moment, but in a way that feels quiet, unshakable, and real. You no longer feel the urge to check your phone before your eyes are even open. You stretch, breathe, and let the sunlight hit your skin before the world gets to make its way into your heart. There's a new rhythm now, a new relationship forming, the one between you and yourself, and it's not always easy. Some days, you'll still feel the pull, the ache, the urge to explain, the hope that maybe he'll finally say what you wanted to hear all along, that you mattered, that he was wrong, that he sees it now. But you'll also start to see the pattern, how often you've confused silence for mystery, how often you've mistaken inconsistency for chemistry, how often you've called it butterflies when it was really your nervous system bracing for disappointment. You weren't in love, you were in hope. And that kind of hope, the kind that sits on the edge of your seat waiting to be chosen, is a slow kind of heartbreak. But there's a deeper truth that rises now, like something ancient returning home. You never had to prove your worth in order to be loved. You never had to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's attention span. You never had to be low maintenance, easygoing, not asking for too much. You never had to pretend you didn't care just to be cared for. That wasn't love, that was survival. And maybe now, finally, you're done surviving relationships that leave you empty. There's grief in this, yes, a deep, wordless grief. Not just for him, but for every version of you that tried so hard to be lovable, that waited by the phone, that smiled through confusion, that made excuses just to keep the story going. You hold her now. You whisper to her, I see you. I'm sorry. You don't have to do that anymore. You begin to rebuild tiny moments. You text your friends more often than you text your fears. You listen to music that doesn't remind you of him. You write things messy, honest, sacred things. You walk alone, and it doesn't feel lonely. You catch your reflection in a window, and you see someone coming back to life. This isn't about punishing him. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about choosing not to abandon yourself anymore. Because texting him first wasn't wrong. You were just trying to connect. You were just trying to express your heart. But if the only time you feel loved is when you're the one keeping the connection alive, that's not love. That's labor. And now, you're choosing rest, not because you've given up, but because you've finally remembered. The love you've been offering everyone else, you deserve it too. It's in the space where you once waited for his reply that something softer begins to bloom. Not loud, not dramatic, just gentle. You feel it when you laugh without wondering if he'd find it cute. You feel it when your phone buzzes and your stomach doesn't twist into knots. You feel it in the quiet moments when you're brushing your hair, making your coffee, folding your laundry, and your mind isn't occupied by what he's doing, where he is, or why he hasn't reached out. Because somewhere in the stillness, you remembered you were whole before him. And the ache wasn't for him, it was for the parts of you that were never fully received. The conversations you gave your heart to that never went anywhere. The effort that hung in the air, unanswered. The tenderness you offered to someone who didn't know what to do with it. That hurts. And that's okay. You're allowed to mourn the dream, the almost, the what if that never became a what is, but you're also allowed to move forward. Not in anger, but in softness. Because choosing not to text him first anymore. It wasn't about playing games, it was about returning to your own voice. You stopped whispering into the void, hoping it would echo back with meaning. You stopped being the one who always fills the silence just to avoid feeling unwanted. You started to listen instead. To what your body had been trying to tell you, the way your chest tightened every time he took hours to reply. The way your heart sank when he responded with LOL after you opened up. The way your soul grew quiet when you realized you were doing all the work. Those weren't overreactions. They were messages, and now you're finally answering them. You've started lighting candles for yourself, wearing perfume when no one's coming over, saying no when you want to say no. Not because you're being cold, but because you're warming up to your own truth. You no longer crave the version of love that makes you anxious. You crave the kind that lets you breathe. The kind where you don't have to reread your texts 5 times to make sure you don't sound too eager. The kind where someone reaches out, not because you begged for attention, but because they miss your energy, your presence, your heart. And maybe, one day, someone will come along who sees you the first time, who doesn't need silence to notice your absence, who doesn't wait for you to initiate just to feel your light. But even if that doesn't happen today, you've already done something remarkable. You chose yourself, not in theory, not as a pretty quote, but in the quiet, messy, courageous way that says, I'm done begging for the bare minimum. And that choice, it changes everything. You begin to understand love in a different way now. Not as a transaction, not as a performance, not as something you have to earn by being more chill, more patient, more cool with whatever. You start to see that love isn't built in those moments where you suppress your needs just to keep someone close. It's built in honesty, in presence, in reciprocity. And what you had with him, it wasn't built that way. It was built on your resilience, your ability to stretch, to hold space, to give without asking, to stay silent about your hurt so he wouldn't pull away. But the truth is, love that requires you to disappear isn't love at all. It's something else. It's a performance you've been perfecting since childhood, and you're finally laying it down. You don't want to be chosen because you were the easiest. You want to be chosen because someone sees the whole of you and still leans in. You want to be loved where you don't have to do backflips just to hold someone's interest. And maybe that kind of love starts with you, with how you speak to yourself on the days you feel invisible, with how you hold your own hand when the silence feels too loud, with how you remind yourself, you are not a question mark, you are a period. A full sentence, a complete story. And the one who is meant for you, they won't need you to convince them. They'll feel you, they'll know. But for now, you don't wait for that. You don't pause your healing on the off chance someone might come around. Because the truth is, if he had the capacity to love you in the way you need, he already would have. That's the heartbreak. And the freedom. You no longer build castles in his silence. You no longer shrink your desires to match his availability. You don't text to test the waters anymore. You know where you stand, and that knowing has become your peace. So when he finally does reach out, if he ever does, you won't be angry. You won't be cruel. You'll be clear. You'll remember all the times you showed up with your full heart, only to be met with half attention. You'll remember the weight of always being the one to initiate, the one to try, the one to carry the connection. And you'll realize you don't want to be the only one building the bridge anymore. So you'll put down the phone, not out of pride, out of healing. And in that moment, your silence will speak the loudest it ever has. There's a calm that begins to settle in your life. Not because everything is figured out, not because you've stopped caring completely, but because you've remembered something sacred. You're allowed to stop choosing people who don't choose you back. There's power in that. And it doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like quiet mornings. Like waking up and not reaching for your phone, like pouring your coffee without wondering what he's thinking, like walking through the world with a little more weight in your steps. Not because you're heavy with sadness, but because you're grounded now. You don't flinch when he crosses your mind. You don't rehearse imaginary conversations. You don't beg the universe to make him see what he missed, because you're starting to understand something deeper. He didn't fail to love you because you weren't enough. He failed to love you because he couldn't meet you. And no amount of softness, patience, or availability would have changed that. You were never too much. You were simply too awake for someone who wanted to sleepwalk through intimacy. So now, you stop texting him first. And you don't just stop the messages, you stop the cycle of proving, of bending, of waiting. You reclaim that energy. You pour it back into your own life, into the parts of you that were neglected while you were so busy filling someone else's cup. You start calling your own heart back home. And the beauty is, you don't need grand gestures to heal. You just need truth. And here's the truth. Your love is not small. It's vast. It's the kind of love that deserves to be met with steady hands, not distant thumbs. It's the kind of love that should be answered with presence, not convenience. It's the kind of love that doesn't need to beg, chase, or shrink. So you stop texting him first. And in that choice, you speak volumes not to him, but to yourself. You say, I will no longer confuse silence for peace. You say, I am no longer starving for connection that only feeds my loneliness. You say, I love myself too much to keep proving I'm lovable. And it's not bitter, it's beautiful. Because now, you wait for no one, you simply live. And in that living, you begin to rise. And somewhere along the way, you forget the exact day you stopped thinking about him. It's not a dramatic ending. No fireworks, no final text thread, no definitive moment, just space. Unoccupied, gentle space where obsession once lived. You catch yourself laughing in the middle of a random conversation and realize you haven't thought about what he's doing or who he's with in hours, maybe even days. You don't even remember when that shift happened. It just did. And that's the thing about healing. It doesn't always announce itself. It arrives quietly, like sunlight creeping through the curtains after a long, dark night. It lives in the softness of a moment where your worth is no longer being negotiated in your own mind. You begin to feel safe again in your own presence. You become more interested in your own thoughts than the ones you used to construct around his absence. You create without hoping he sees it. You dress for the weather, not for the off chance you might run into him. You post what you love, not what might catch his attention. You're free, not because he finally showed up, but because you stopped waiting for someone who never would. And maybe, just maybe, you start to realize that what you miss isn't him. It's the part of you that believed love had to feel like longing. That love was earned, not received. That if you could just be enough, stay enough, offer enough, it would all finally feel safe. But love, real love, doesn't work that way. It doesn't ask you to become smaller, quieter, more convenient. It doesn't punish you with silence and reward you with crumbs. It shows up consistently, freely, honestly, and you're learning to wait for that. Not with bitterness, not with walls, but with wisdom, with the kind of wisdom that comes from heartbreak, that didn't destroy you but refined you. You no longer rush into the next connection just to distract yourself from the last. You're not interested in repeating the same patterns in new packaging. You want depth. You want real. You want someone who doesn't just receive your energy but returns it. And until then, you are not empty. You are not lacking. You are not half of anything. You are whole. And this wholeness, it's not a destination. It's a decision to stop chasing, stop texting first, stop abandoning your own heart for the sake of keeping someone else's attention. Because the real you, the one who once waited by the phone, rereading his last message hoping it meant more, is no longer here. She's moved on. She's writing a new story, one where she is no longer the echo in someone else's silence, but the voice in her own life. Clear, steadied, unapologetic. There's a quiet power in not reaching out, not out of pride, not out of strategy, but because you've finally seen yourself clearly. You remember the girl who used to stay up late, staring at her screen, crafting the perfect message that sounded casual but still caring, who'd delete and rewrite, her heart pounding, as if every word could tilt the scale of his attention, who mistook his short replies for mystery, who confused the thrill of being needed with the feeling of being safe. You remember her, and you thank her because she tried. She gave everything she had with the tools she was given. She wanted connection more than control. She wasn't weak, she was hopeful. And hope is a beautiful thing, until it starts costing you your peace. But you're not her anymore. You've outgrown the love that asks you to wait around for proof that you matter. You've outgrown the relationship dynamic where silence is a power play and vulnerability is met with distance. You've outgrown the version of yourself that thought being low maintenance meant being lovable. Now you love yourself enough to let silence be silence, to let him sit with the space he never cared to fill. And if he ever wonders why you stopped texting first, he'll probably think it happened overnight. He'll tell himself you changed. He'll forget the 1,000 ways he slowly trained you to expect less. He won't remember the hours you spent holding conversations together with nothing but hope and grace. He won't recall the way your heart broke every time he replied with one word or didn't reply at all. But you'll remember, and you'll know this wasn't some impulsive act. It was a reclaiming. You reclaimed your time, your energy, your presence. You pulled your soul out of a space where it was never met. You stopped extending yourself to someone who never truly arrived. And now, you are no longer waiting. You are living with more clarity, more joy, more softness for yourself. You've begun spending your energy on things that return it. People who call, friends who show up, dreams that waited patiently while you poured yourself into a black hole of maybe he'll text back. The universe has shifted, not because he changed, but because you did. And one day, someone will look at you and see it all, not just your beauty, but your silence, the kind that speaks volumes. The kind that says, I no longer reach out to be chosen, I reach inward to remember I already am. And when that day comes, you won't feel like you finally won. You'll feel like you came home. And now, it's been weeks, maybe even months. You're no longer counting, not because it doesn't matter, but because it no longer owns you. There's a life here, a rhythm, a softness, a deeper exhale. You catch it in the mornings when you wake up and the first thought isn't him. When you realize how long it's been since you needed to resist texting him, because the urge has faded into something smaller, something quieter, something that no longer calls the shots in your day. Healing doesn't come with confetti. It comes with stillness. It comes with going a whole day without wondering why you weren't enough for someone who couldn't even meet you halfway. It comes with recognizing that your worth was never measured by how someone else showed up or didn't. You realize now that love, real love, is not a performance. It doesn't require you to chase, or convince, or hurt. And when he finally does text again, and yes, he might, it won't hit you the way it used to. His name will pop up, and your heart won't jump. You won't stop breathing. You won't spin into stories about what it might mean. You'll just see it, and you'll remember all the times you reached out first, all the ways you tried to keep the connection alive, even when it barely had a pulse, all the times you waited, hoping silence would magically turn into effort. And you'll know you don't live there anymore. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You just don't need that kind of love again. The kind that asks you to disappear just to be kept. Because now, you've tasted something else. You've tasted solitude, and it didn't break you. You've learned how to hold yourself when no one else is calling. You've remembered how to be full without someone else filling the space. And it changes everything. You're not looking for someone to complete you. You're waiting for someone who's complete enough to meet you, who texts not because you went silent, but because they care, who chooses you not just when it's convenient, but consistently. And until that love comes, if it comes, you are not empty. You are not waiting. You are growing every day, every breath. You have become the kind of woman who no longer texts first, because she no longer believes love has to hurt to be real, because she no longer fears silence, because she finally knows her presence is not a question, it's an answer.